Hi, this is Dexter Gelfand, with another talk on my general subject of therapeutic spiritual counseling. And the subject of this talk is what we will call personas, created wearable identities which carry forth their own particular attitude and which affects us all in many ways. And this is a very broad subject, so I'm not going to try and cover it all in one short talk. So let's just call this persona talk number one, okay, of a series. Okay, so what do I mean by a persona? I think the word is pretty well generally understood. There are other terms meant to mean the same thing. Identity, for instance, or valence is another word that's sometimes used for this. What we're speaking about is a self, a me, a taken on self or me that is, when it is present, always presenting itself in the same way. Okay? And we take these on and they continue forward sort of unconsciously. A particular persona with a particular attitude. It has its own purpose. It can be to defend. It can be to prevent being mistreated or overwhelmed. It can be to get love or attention. It can be to dominate in some situation. But most of these personas are born out of fear. They're a response to being afraid that something will or won't happen to or for you. Okay? A persona is a substitute presence for you actually being present in a given situation with a given person who is presenting their own identity. And a persona is based in its own particular attitude. There are certain rules that can be seen to apply to a persona. There are tremendous downsides to personas, and generally the two things we need to do, the first of all is to consciously recognize it and then gain control over these and consciously decide whether or not to maintain or keep these personas. Most of the time, if not all of the time, the best thing to do is to do away with any fixed attitude, any fixed persona that will always react the same way and show itself the same way in any given situation. They're definitely very restrictive. A persona can only experience, whatever persona you're wearing, it can only experience things that happen to fall within the parameters of what that me would experience, okay? And what that me would experience is based on the principle that all personas, each one of them operates to justify its own existence and to maintain it through justifying its validity, okay? One of my recent talks was on the idea that we all have to justify our existence, which is a pretty unpleasant worldview. Why should we feel we have to walk around justifying who or what we are, what we're doing? It's better to just do it because we want to do it, because it aligns with some great goal or purpose and is a joyous thing to experience and be, okay? But this idea of justifying one's existence, it bleeds over into the personas that we take on and we create. Basically, one way to think of your identities that you take on, your personas, is, the phrase that, like, God created man in his own image. Well, we create into these personas a lot of the principles that we feel apply to our own existence, such as one must justify their existence. So every persona, every me that you become in a given situation, think of it this way. It's more easy, perhaps, to observe the personas that other people wear. It can almost be funny to see that they take on this attitude and they wear it all the time, and it's rarely appropriate, but it's who or what they are. It's what they become. Again, a persona is a substitute for actually being present to deal with something. It's because some past experiences or feelings get triggered and a person feels they cannot simply be. So they have to be something, some fixed thing. A lot of people talk about finding themselves. Who am I really? Well, you could look beyond that and say, why must you be some sort of fixed, identifiable, always with the same attributes and characteristics thing? that only prevents you from growing and changing. Okay, it's all personas are a solution to something. Okay, some situation, some fear, some desire. But anyway, so a persona is basically, you can think of as a negative thing, in that if somebody's even wearing a persona, being a certain way, displaying this certain identifiable attitude, that they're not really simply being with you. They feel like they have to carry forward this personality, this identity, to deal with their life, or at least deal with you in the moment that they're being that way. Now, here's another thing to understand about a persona, is that a lot of times these come about through projection. Let me explain what I mean. Okay, a persona, in a physical sense, and there is a physical, mechanical quality to this, is that a persona can be seen to be a projection. And it's a three-dimensional, a holographic projection. There's an image to a persona. There's a way of behaving, a way of speaking. There's a body language. There are physical characteristics of the image of the persona. You know, how happy or sad, or how dominant or submissive it is, what the persona looks like. You know, and so we're walking around with all, you know, different personas that get triggered at different times. But not only do we have these personas which project a person that is meant to represent us in a given situation, but everybody else is doing this too. But not only do we project a persona, but we also project some persona onto other people. We not only are saying, this is who or what you are to regard me as, okay? We are also sending out, more or less unconsciously, this is who you are, okay? This is who you are to me. You know, it can be complimentary, it can be derogatory, it can be defensive, it can be a lot of things, but it actually is experienced by the other person on some degree, and on an unconscious level, to some degree on a conscious level, that you are kind of making them into whatever it is you're making them as, and they are doing the same to you. See, the four basic projections of personality or persona between two people are you going, this is who I am, and that's who you are, okay? These are projections of a three-dimensional holographic me and a three-dimensional holographic you with definite characteristics, okay? And so there's those two from you, and just from like that from the other person, that person is also saying, this is me. This is who you are to regard me as being. So that's a projection that travels from them to you, and you get this image and this idea of how they're projecting themselves. And they are also projecting an image of you. This is saying, this is who or what I'm regarding you as. This is who you are to be to me. So you can see, I think you can understand, with it's almost like dueling projections, okay? Both people are asserting who they are, more or less unconsciously, to some degree consciously, and who or what the other person is to them. So this generates a game between two individuals of each is projecting who each of them is to and with each other. So you can see there's going to be some inherent dissonance and some inherent conflict in that. So this accounts for a lot of the feeling that we need a certain amount of distance from ourselves and other people, because there's this dissonance, this constant game going on, to the degree that we can have harmony and agreement in the moment as to who and what we are. We can really relate to each other on a much higher and better level. But these projections absolutely get in the way. One of the biggest liabilities of a persona is just that it has its fixed parameters. Okay? Can't experience anything outside of the parameters of the particular persona that the person's being at the time. Let me give you some examples. Somebody who's being like the tough guy who always has to dominate, always has to be right. You know, the person who's expressing themselves as somebody to be loved all the time. You know, the personas they all have a particular distinct purpose to themselves, to accomplish something, or to prevent something. okay? And so you can see how these can be born out of fear. If you need to feel a need to prevent something from happening, there's something you're afraid of, you can't experience or deal with, okay? If you're projecting something that gets a positive reaction, that gets love or admiration, that can be seen as a fear of not getting love or admiration, or that there's some kind of competition for that, okay? But of course, I'm not saying that it isn't very natural to love and to be loved and to need love, but these can actually be the prime things that actually fuel the need to create various personae to better survive a situation or better experience a situation. To project like I don't need anyone's love, or to project like I'm so lovable. These can be seen to be the basis of almost any created, consistent persona, personality, and so forth. This can create a lot of conflicts, these dueling projections. One thing you can do in the present moment with the people in your environment that you're going to continue to relate to and have relationships with is to understand this, and understand that if you put out something that challenges the other persona that the other person's wearing in some way, okay, that disagrees with it, well, again, the solution from the other side being that the persona can only experience those elements or feelings or experiences or attitudes that are within its own parameters, okay, and understanding that every persona works to justify its own existence. Every persona, every me that is created will either find, fabricate, or actually create the circumstances that explain and justify the persona. So if somebody is a person who is in a persona of being mistreated by others, well, that person is going to take what comes from other people as mistreatment whenever they feel that identity is not being accepted or is being challenged. They're going to say, you're mistreating them, or tell you how somebody has been mistreating them. And they're going to do this to the degree that they feel a need to reinforce, establish, or reestablish the acceptance of their identity. All identities work. They must justify the identity. They must reinforce the identity. Because when you're being that me, not being that me represents a threat to your survival. So any challenge of not accepting the me that you're presenting yourself as is going to be met with tremendous resistance one way or another. Okay, because the identity has the drive to be recognized and survive as it is presenting itself with the qualities and characteristics of that identity. So to some degree, any disagreement can bring about an upset just due to it being taken as a challenge of the existence, of the justification of the existence of this identity, putting forth the attitude that it puts forth and the characteristics that it puts forth that define and make distinctive this me that the person is being. So what do you do? Well, what you can do is, there's an old expression called granting beingness. You know, ideally it would mean granting each of us as the basic, unlimited, potential, powerful, wonderful spiritual beings that we all essentially are. But in practical circumstances of the games of dueling personae, sometimes the thing to do is to recognize the me that the person is currently presenting themselves as being, and to not disagree with that beingness, to sort of, even on a nonverbal level or spiritual or emotional level, kind of put out acceptance and admiration and understanding of the me that the person is being in that moment, rather than finding that me objectionable or putting forth your own projection of who or what the person in front of you is. But to the degree that you accomplish that other person in the persona that they're being will feel less of a need to act out okay, from a recent article that I've written, and I will do a video of it too, called 5 Principles of Coexistence. Anytime a person says or does something inappropriate or possibly destructive, it is because in one way or another, they don't feel safe. And the basic challenge to safety is non-acceptance or non-recognition of the person as they are conceiving and presenting themselves. Get it? So therefore, if you grant beingness, if you're putting out like, yes, you are exactly as you are, creating yourself, presenting yourself, and that's something to admire or accept or understand, that person operating through that persona will feel unchallenged. They won't feel so much of a need to extremely act out the characteristics of that identity towards you. And they will kind of relax, and you can be more comfortable with each other. And in turn, you will also feel less of a need to beef up your and empower and assert whatever identity you are manifesting in that moment too. Granting beingness. So I think I've covered a lot for this one talk, and we will leave it at that. Just recognize the tremendous importance in the moment and in your daily life of understanding and recognizing the properties, characteristics, behaviors, and tendencies of any persona. Okay, this is Dex signing off. For more, see my website, dexsessions.com, and there are plenty of articles and videos, and I hope some things you'll find interesting. And if you'd like to experience how we can process some of these things, dismantle identities, which are connected to all kinds of pains and sensations and worries and other things, get in touch. Thanks.